আমাকে শোনা যাচ্ছে?
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
ঠিক আছে। গুড মর্নিং রঞ্জন। গুড মর্নিং organizers Nilendu and Pooja. Principal sir P.K. Dash College এসেছেন কি? Anyway, P.K. Dash College এর থেকে যারা এসেছেন co-organizer of this workshop, তাদের সকলকে সুপ্রভাত এবং সবার শেষে সবথেকে বড় করে অনেক শুভেচ্ছা এবং ভালোবাসা জানিয়ে গুড মর্নিং বলছি। 5th সেমিস্টার কলকাতা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় যাদবপুর বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় ছাত্রীদের বা যদি অন্য কোনো বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় থেকেও ছেলেমেয়েরা থাকে, তোমাদের সবাইকে এই অনুষ্ঠানে ওয়েলকাম করছি। আজকে তোমরা আমার ভূমিকা হচ্ছে ওই ক্রিকেটের মাঠে আম্পায়ার যেরকম দিয়ে টসটা করে দিয়ে খেলাটা শুরু করেন সেই রকম। তো আমি খুব সংক্ষেপে একটা কথাই বলবো যে গত ফেব্রুয়ারি মাস থেকে তোমাদের সঙ্গে বঙ্কিম সরকার কলেজের এই গ্রুপটার একটা সান্নিধ্য বজায় আছে এবং ক্রমান্বয়ে এই সান্নিধ্যটা বাড়ছে। ইনফ্যাক্ট গতকাল রাত্রে, তাও প্রায় রাত্রি 12:30টার পর 6জন স্টুডেন্ট এই গ্রুপে জয়েন করতে চেয়েছে, কিন্তু হোয়াটসঅ্যাপ গ্রুপে যেহেতু একটা নির্দিষ্ট সংখ্যার ঊর্ধ্বে আর জয়েন করানো যায় না, তাই আর জয়েন করানো গেল না। আমরা অন্য কোনো ব্যবস্থা নিশ্চয়ই নেব, কিন্তু আমি এই পরিসংখ্যানটা এই কারণেই বলছি যে ডেফিনেটলি নীলেন্দু এবং পূজা যে গ্রুপটা নিয়েছে, এই গ্রুপটা ফরমেশনের মধ্য দিয়ে সেই গ্রুপটা নিশ্চয়ই কিছু না কিছু ভাবে বেনিফিটস বা ইউজ ছাত্র সমাজের কাছে পৌঁছে দিতে পেরেছে। তাই তোমরা কেউ লেফট করছো না, বরঞ্চ নতুন নতুন বন্ধু বান্ধবরা এসে জয়েন করছে। এটা নিশ্চয়ই আসার কথা, ভালোর কথা, এবং আমরাও খুশি যে আমরা সার্ভিস দিতে পারছি তোমাদেরকে, বিশেষ করে এই লকডাউনে। অ্যাজ পূজা হ্যাজ সেড, উই আর লকড বাট উই আর নট ডাউন। আমি তোমাদের বলবো তোমরা ডাউন হইও না। নীলেন্দু এবং পূজার মতন সুন্দর অর্গানাইজাররা আছে ওয়েবিনারের মাধ্যমে বা অন্য কোনো ভাবে। তোমাদেরকে জীবনে এখনো বহু যেতে হবে, কোথায় যেতে হবে, কিভাবে যেতে হবে, তার পথগুলো অন্তত করা হবে, দেখানো হবে। যাওয়া না যাওয়া তোমাদের ব্যাপার। তো সেই হোপ এবং অ্যাসপিরেশনকে লাইভ রাখার জন্য আমরা বারে বারে তোমাদের সঙ্গে লাইভ হচ্ছি এবং হব, এটাই আমাদের প্রতিশ্রুতি। আজকের অনুষ্ঠানে আমি রঞ্জন আমার বন্ধু, পেয়ে আমরা খুশি। আমরা এর আগেও সেমিস্টারে রঞ্জনকে পেয়েছিলাম এবং যথেষ্ট ভালো ফিডব্যাক স্টুডেন্টসদের, তারা বেনিফিটেড হয়েছে। আজকে সংখ্যা তো অলরেডি 170 ছাড়িয়ে গেছে, আরো স্টুডেন্টস ঢুকছে এবং অনেকে ইউটিউব স্ট্রিমিং এ আছে। তার মানে প্রায় 200 জনের বেশি আজকের অনুষ্ঠানে যোগ দিচ্ছে। আজকে তোমাদের রঞ্জন স্যার ওপেন ইকোনমি এবং ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমি নিয়ে কথা বলবেন। দিন ম্যাক্রো ইকোনমিক্স উনি এত সুন্দর বলেছেন যে আমি ওয়েবিনারটার কোনো একটা মুহূর্তের জন্য উঠে যেতে পারিনি। আজকেও মনে হয় তাই হবে যে আমি উঠে যেতে পারবো না। যদিও রঞ্জন তোমায় বলে রাখি, কাল থেকে কলেজে অ্যাডমিশন শুরু। আমি গতকাল রাত্রে 4টে অবধি যে কাজকর্ম করেছি, আজকে সকালেও কিছু কাজকর্ম করে এইখানে এসে বসে। আমি আশা করছি আগামী 2 ঘন্টায় আমাকে আর কেউ ডাকবে না, আমি উঠবো না, আমি পুরো অনুষ্ঠানটাই শুনবো। এবং আজকের অনুষ্ঠান আগের 2টো দিনের ওয়েবিনারের মতনই সফল হবে, এমনকি আরো বেশি সফল হবে। একটি কথা বলতে পারি ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমিক্স নিয়ে, ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমিক্স কলকাতা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ে আমি একটা জিনিস, আমি বিশ্বভারতী স্টুডেন্ট, ওখানে ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমিক্স বেশ মর্যাদা পেত। কলকাতায় এটা আমার অভিজ্ঞতা, আমার ভুলও হতে পারে, যে ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমিক্সে পুরোরানি এক্সপিরিয়েন্স করে আর কি। একটু আমার কিরকম মনে হয় যে একটু ব্যাকবেঞ্চে থাকে ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমিক্স, সেখানে রঞ্জন আজকে ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমিক্স নিয়ে বলবে বা ইন্ডিয়ান ইকোনমি নিয়ে বলবে। ইট ইজ রিয়েলি a good opportunity for all the participants here, including me, to listen from a person like Ranjan on issues relating to this particular domain. তোমরা অনেকেই aspirants for the competitive examinations after graduation, and Indian questions on Indian economics form a fairly sizable portion of those question papers, at least in some of the examination. So from all this point of view, today's webinar is important, and I would request all the participants to listen him, to when possible interact with him. আর একটাই রিকোয়েস্ট করব, যখন তখন লিভ করো না। হতে পারে 2 ঘন্টা বসে থাকতে হবে, সেই 2 ঘন্টাটা বসে থাকো, কিন্তু তোমাদের বেনিফিটে উনি আসছেন, উনি বলছেন with due honor, with all honor to him, আমি ওনার হয়েও তোমাদের বলবো, তুমি যেদিন কোনোদিন যদি টিচার হও, তুমি যদি বুঝতে পারো যে ক্লাসে তুমি যাদের পড়াচ্ছ তাদের মধ্যে থেকে কেউ ক্লাস থেকে বেরিয়ে যাচ্ছে, it becomes a disturbance. So don't do that. Stay in the webinar till the end, and সবাই মাইক্রোফোন মিউট করা থাকুক। যারা চ্যাটে বলবে, আমরা সমস্ত চ্যাটকে রেকর্ডে রাখবো এবং সেই কোয়েশ্চেন্স গুলো পৌঁছে দেব। ঠিক আছে রঞ্জন, আই থিংক ইউ মে স্টার্ট।
শোনা যাচ্ছে?
হ্যাঁ, শোনা যাচ্ছে।
অডিবল? ওকে।
হ্যাঁ।
So with your kind permission, then can I start?
Yes, please start.
Okay. I express my profound gratitude to Principal Dr. Tilak Chatterjee. Tilakda is a senior to me and a very good friend. I express my gratitude to the entire organizing committee, and in particular to Dr. Nilendu Chatterjee. Nilendu, thank you for waking me up today in the morning. And Nilendu, in fact, has motivated me to participate in this kind of webinar on teaching learning process. I mean, for the last couple of months, I have been talking about COVID here and there in webinar. That is more or less extempore type of thing. So whatever I felt like talking, I talked. Good or bad, right or wrong, I do not know. But when I am actually participating in a webinar on the teaching learning process, one has to be very careful. I mean, a teacher has to be careful in a particular sense that it is not a classroom teaching. I cannot understand the students' understanding of the lecture delivered by reading their facial expression. So it's a challenge for me. So I accepted the challenge. Right at the outset, let me tell you that today's task is really a very daunting task. It is intellectually stimulating as well, but a very daunting task. I have to cover within a span of time, say time of 2 hours, both international macroeconomics and development experience in India with reference to planning, the strategy of planning, the different kinds of situations that guided the methods of planning, etc. So in a way, the time of 2 hours is grossly insufficient to do justice to both the topics. Anyway, I will try my best. So I discuss this matter with Nilendu. So let me divide the time, split the time into 2 components. Say 1 hour or 10 minutes like that, I will speak on international macroeconomics, and the rest I will speak on Indian economic issues and problems. So this is the kind of planning I have. And now one thing is that the interactive session, and in fact that is very important. I love to receive questions from students and participants. And in fact, if the students ask questions, participants ask questions, then probably I can enrich myself, because maybe some of the issues or some of the ideas have not come to me. I might have missed some important points, but if the questions are asked, then definitely I can sharpen my domain of knowledge. So with this short note, let me begin with international macroeconomics. Now, yes.
স্যার একটু স্টপ করছি, আমাদের আরেকজন যে অর্গানাইজিং কমিটি প্রিন্সিপাল উনি আছেন, ওনাকে একটু বলার জন্য একটু স্টপ করছি।
শিওর পূজা।
হ্যাঁ, আমরা আমাদের কলেজের যে কোনো অনুষ্ঠানে আমাদের প্রিন্সিপাল স্যারকে অভিভাবক হিসেবে পাই, কিন্তু সাম্প্রতিককালে আমাদের সৌভাগ্য যে আমরা আরেকজন অভিভাবকের সান্নিধ্য পেয়েছি। তিনি কেকে দাস কলেজের প্রিন্সিপাল ডক্টর রামকৃষ্ণ চক্রবর্তী। বর্তমানে তিনি আমাদের উৎসাহিত করছেন এবং তার টেকনিক্যাল এফিসিয়েন্সির দ্বারা আমরা সমৃদ্ধ হচ্ছি। এই ওয়েবিনারটি আয়োজনে তিনি এবং তার কলেজের কম্পিউটার সায়েন্স ডিপার্টমেন্ট আমাদেরকে সাহায্য করে চলেছে। তার মধ্যে আমরা একটা ক্যাপ্টেনকে লক্ষ্য করি, তিনি এই অনলাইন শিক্ষাকে যাতে সাফল্যিত করা যায় তাই পশ্চিমবঙ্গের বিভিন্ন কলেজে টিচারদের জন্য বিভিন্ন ট্রেনিং এর আয়োজন করে চলেছেন। তাই আজকে এই অভিভাবককে আমরা সাথে পেয়ে খুবই আনন্দিত। তাই এই ওয়েবিনার সম্পর্কে আমি তাকে কিছু বলার জন্য অনুরোধ করছি। স্যার প্লিজ। স্যার কি অনলাইন আছে? রিদুল স্যার, স্যারকে তো অনলাইনে দেখলাম।
আচ্ছা, কোন তো ছিলেন?
হ্যাঁ, আমি তো এই ওনাকে দেখলাম।
আমি ফোন করছি।
হ্যাঁ, আমি ওনাকে দেখলাম।
মৃদুল আছে?
উনি আসছেন, জয়েন করছেন।
হ্যাঁ, ঠিক আছে।
স্যার আপনি কিছু যদি বলেন ওয়েবিনার সম্পর্কে।
জয়েন করেছেন উনি?
হ্যাঁ।
কেকে দাস কলেজ এবং বঙ্কিম সরকার কলেজ পরস্পরের হাত ধরে এগিয়ে যাওয়ার ডিমান্ড। শিক্ষা প্রতিষ্ঠানগুলো পরস্পরকে সহযোগিতা করবে এবং সবটাই কিন্তু ছাত্র কেন্দ্রিক। ছাত্রকে কেন্দ্র করে এই শিক্ষা পদ্ধতিটা, সেখানে এরকম টাইপের মাস্টারমশাইরা এক্সপিরিয়েন্স মাস্টারমশাইরা আসবেন এবং ছাত্রদের সামনে হবে, এটা একটা গর্বের বিষয়। এবং আমি সর্বতভাবে এই ধরনের ওয়েবিনারের সফলতা কামনা করি এবং আজকের যারা ছাত্র, যারা আজকের মাস্টারমশাই রিসোর্স পার্সনকে তোমরা পেয়েছো, তোমরা উপকৃত হবে, তোমরা ধৈর্য ধরে শুনবে। তিলকবাবু বলেই দিয়েছেন, কেউ লিভ করো না, তোমাদের প্রশ্ন রাখো, প্রশ্ন করতে শেখো, কেন সেই প্রশ্নই তোমাকে একটা জায়গায় এনে দাঁড় করিয়ে দিতে পারে। জীবনে প্রশ্ন করাটা ভীষণ দরকার, সবকিছু মেনে নেওয়া নয়, এবং তার জন্যই আমরা শিক্ষক মশাইরা তোমাদের পাশে আছি। আবারও আমি সফলতা কামনা করছি আজকের এই ওয়েবিনারে। আর আমাদের আজকের রিসোর্স পার্সনকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ আমাদের ডাকে ছাড়া দেওয়ার জন্য।
থ্যাংক ইউ রামকৃষ্ণ। আগে দেখতে পাই
Must explain open economy macroeconomics or international macroeconomics. But there are universities, for example, Presidency University, for example, St. Xavier's College. Should know certain aspects of the theory of international macroeconomics, without which actually international macroeconomics remains grossly incomplete. But we have followed the UGC template, so we have to accept it. Now, what are the learning objectives of this? The screen has disappeared. What are the learning objectives of this particular course? One is definitely exploring, understanding dimensions of globalization. Openness an economy is essentially related to the process of globalization. Now, globalization as a process of economic reform has started since mid-80s onwards in most of the developing countries. Whether you like globalization or not, you have to accept that globalization is irreversible, with certain breaks here and there, but globalization cannot be reversed back. I mean, globalization cannot be stopped. There might be some breaks, there might be some temporary discontinuities for reasons, but globalization as a process always means that the economies as a whole, I mean the countries, all countries, in some way or other are interdependent or interlinked. That means my performance, macroeconomic performance, depends on your performance if you are my trading partner. Similarly, your performance depends on my performance, assuming that I and you are trading partners. So that is the first thing. Secondly, I mean, particularly for Calcutta University students, so far you have studied different types of closed economy macroeconomic models. For example, you started with the SKM, simple Keynesian model, then ISLM model, then the so-called ADS, aggregate demand, aggregate supply, which is known as the complete Keynesian model, etc. Now, all these models are closed economy models. Now, closed economy model is a good starting point. But if you want to do any kind of research, for example, if you want to, for example, write a paper on macroeconomics in recent times, then keeping the economy closed is unacceptable. For the simple reason that economies are no longer closed. So we have to understand why the results related to policies or related to certain disturbances differ between closed economy and open economy. So that is the second learning objective. The third one, Devanjan, proceed. Devanjan, proceed. Achha. Now, so these are the two major things. Another thing which actually I have not included just because of the limitation of the syllabus, that is the international macroeconomics is very much required to understand different episodes of currency crisis or balance of payment crisis. We have many episodes of currency crisis or balance of payment crisis, starting from the Latin American debt crisis to the currency crisis in the East Asian countries in the middle of 90s. So there are different episodes of currency crisis. And however, the problem with the syllabus is that this currency crisis is not included in the syllabus. Ideally, it should be. At least I am not talking about the complicated mathematical models of currency crisis, but the basic ideas of currency crisis, why balance of payment crisis occurs, should be known to the students. And I'll be coming to it rather briefly in connection with Indian economic experience, particularly the balance of payment crisis in the late 80s and early 90s. Now, what is a balance of payment account? Actually, balance of payment account is a systematic record of economic transactions between the home country and the rest of the world. So if you take, for example, any country, India, for example, so you record all transactions between India and the rest of the world. And then you get the balance of payment account. Now, this balance of payment account in turn is subdivided into several accounts. So that will be coming to. Next. Debanjan, next. Now, that's the earlier slide. That's the earlier slide. Before components or here. Now, one thing one has to understand very clearly. We use the word credit item and debit item in connection with balance of payment. Now you will be getting different types of interpretations or definitions of credit item in different textbooks. They are all correct, no problem with that. But let us make matters simple. It is a task of an economist, the task of a student and teacher of an economy. Credit item is a very simple thing. Any transaction which leads to increase in the stock of foreign exchange is a credit item. A debit item is exactly the opposite. If a transaction reduces the stock of foreign exchange, then that is a debit item. And this credit item and debit item are recorded a transaction reducing the stock of foreign exchange of a particular country. Then the next slide. Now the next slide, let me very intuitively explain the whole thing. It is just for the sake of participants to have this particular slide or PPT. I'll be requesting the organizers, whoever will be requesting you to send these PPTs, semester 3 earlier, semester 5 this time, please send the PPTs to whoever is interested in. Now, there are 3 sub-accounts. One is called current account, one is called capital account, and the third one is called official reserve transaction, or it may be called official settlement account. Official reserve transaction is based on, this particular selection of words is based on Capes, Jones and Frenkel, a very well-known textbook on international macroeconomics, and also not all international macroeconomics on international trade. So they use the word official reserve transaction, but there is a very famous book, in fact a classic book by Don Bush. The title of the book is Open Economy Macroeconomics. Don Bush used the term official settlement account, but both have the identical meaning. Anyway, what is current account? Current account records trade in commodities and services. So that is current account. Now, for example, let us take a very simple example, export. Now, export of commodities or export of services or whatever, this is actually recorded on the current account. The export is what item? Credit or debit item? export is a credit item because export leads to earning of foreign exchange. Import, on the other hand, means what? Import, on the other hand, means a debit item because it means actually a fall in the stock of foreign exchange. So you understand that whenever you are recording any transaction in any account, you have to be very careful about the nature of that particular transaction, whether it is a credit item or it is a debit item. Then I come to the capital account. Now, capital account actually is a record of trading assets. So that's all right, trading assets. But actually, what are the different components of capital account transactions? Now, and this capital account transaction is a very, is a very intriguing thing. I mean, why it is an intriguing thing? I'll be trying to discuss this particular dimension of capital account, probably in some details if the time permits. First of all, let us understand the different components of capital account. One is foreign direct investment called FDI or direct foreign investment, DFI. One is foreign portfolio investment. And the third one is external commercial borrowing. Now, external commercial borrowing is essentially an outcome of the process of globalization. Now, there is a distinction between FDI and FPI. What is the distinction? The distinction between FDI and FPI is this. FDI is actually kind of long-term investment by multinationals, and it is not very volatile. Suppose, think of a multinational who plans to invest in your country. So suppose it wants to set up a plant. So definitely the multinational corporation has to establish contracts with the local resources, with the local resource owners, workers, for example, the landowner, for example, the government, for example. So a foreign direct investment involves long-term stake. Foreign direct investment takes time to enter an economy, but if it enters an economy, then it doesn't run away very quickly. So that is the nature of foreign direct investment. But what is FPI? Foreign portfolio investment is actually nothing but purchase or sale of shares, particularly equities. If you look, for example, in the Indian context, FPI is rooted, by and large, is rooted through the stock market or equity market, particularly after 1992, when the globalization was introduced as a matter of economic reform in India. Now, see, you can easily understand, even without knowing any kind of economics, that today you can buy an equity or a stock or a share, and tomorrow you can sell it. So FPI is a kind of short-term capital flow, and it is very volatile. It is very volatile. Now the word volatility is very important in this context. The volatility means that FPI may enter the economy very quickly and in a huge amount, in a hefty amount, but it can be withdrawn also very quickly. So that means FPI is a very volatile component of capital flow. On the other hand, external commercial borrowing is what? Now see, till early 80s, by and large, the dominant component of foreign loan or foreign assistance was foreign aid. There's a distinction between foreign aid and commercial borrowing. Foreign aid is given by some advanced countries to developing countries, or it is given by some international agencies like World Bank, IMF, etc., or Asian Development Bank to developing countries. Now, foreign aid has many components of concessionality. Now, this concessionality has to be understood. First of all, the maturity period is very long. Secondly, recipient country can repay the foreign aid in local currency. Thirdly, the interest rate on foreign aid is much lower than the so-called market rate of interest in the capital market. So that is foreign aid. But 80s onwards, foreign aid has almost dried up. Since the foreign aid has dried up, the developing countries in the post-reform period have to find out alternative ways to get commercial assistance, and thus comes external commercial borrowing. External commercial borrowing is definitely based on the normal market mechanism. So no question of repaying the loan in the local currency. The maturity period is very tightly stipulated and the interest rate is much higher. So that is external commercial borrowing. Now, both current account and another point is that this benefit or whatever you can say, the access to external commercial borrowing, ECB, external commercial borrowing, is open to not only to the government but also to the private corporate sector, to the investors, right? So Tata can take loan, for example, from international capital market. Mukesh Ambani can take loan from international capital market. I'm not very sure, probably Nirav Modi can also take loan from international capital market. Now, so you understand that external commercial borrowing is accessible to both the government as well as to the private investors. Now, both current account and capital account transactions are called autonomous transactions. Now, you have to understand the meaning of autonomous transactions, without which actually the last component, the so-called the intervention of the central bank, cannot be understood. The autonomous transactions means that transactions based on private profit motive. Think of an exporter. How much I will export in a foreign country depends on the profit maximizing exercise of the exporter. Or think of an importer. How much I will be importing depends on the importer's profit maximizing exercise. So similarly, how much capital I will invest in your country. Suppose I am a foreigner, how much capital I'll be investing in your country, be that in the form of FDI or FPI or whatever. So that again depends on my own profit maximizing calculations. So that means that autonomous transactions are based on the typical profit motive driven activities. And current account plus capital account together determines the balance of payment situation of a country. Now let me explain this particular component, this particular idea a bit more. I am saying that the CA and K, the current and capital account together determine the balance of payment situation of a country. What is meant by that? It's a very simple meaning. Suppose you identify all credit items on both the accounts, current and capital. Take the aggregate value of the current account and capital account credit items. Similarly, you aggregate the debit items on both current account and capital account. So you now have the aggregate value of credit items on current account. You also have an aggregate value of debit items on current account. Take the difference. Value of credit items on all current and capital account together. Similarly, the value of debit items on both accounts together. Take the difference. If the difference is positive, it means balance of payment surplus. If the difference is negative, then it means balance of payment deficit. And if the difference is zero, That means balance of payment equilibrium. So that means the autonomous transactions determine the nature of the balance of payment situation of a country. Then what is the role of the central bank? Now suppose here I assume that the central bank I'll be trying to discuss it in some details later on if possible, of course if possible. Suppose the central bank fixes the exchange rate. Now I think many students are not yet initiated to open economy macroeconomics. So I have to tell you what is exchange rate. Exchange rate has many nuances. So I am talking about basically the nominal exchange rate. The nominal exchange rate is this. It is rupee by dollar, rupee by foreign currency. Suppose the rupee by dollar, suppose I am saying that the exchange rate is 74 against dollar. So what does that mean? That means that $1 is equivalent to 74 rupee. So that is $1 can fetch 74 rupee. So that is the meaning of exchange rate, nominal exchange rate. So rupee by dollar. Suppose that exchange rate is fixed by the central bank. Suppose. Now suppose there is a balance of payment surplus. So what the central bank will do? Now here, few clarificatory remarks are in order. Balance of payment surplus means, participants please note, balance of payment surplus means excess supply of foreign currency, and balance of payment deficit means excess demand for foreign currency. I repeat again because that is very vital. BOP surplus means excess supply of foreign currency, and BOP deficit means excess demand for foreign currency. Suppose the economy experiences balance of payment surplus. Now, if the economy experiences balance of payment surplus, it means that this excess supply has to be, the slide has to be, the screen has not been fully shared. Devanjan, yeah, no, let me proceed. I will be coming to it. Okay, Devanjan, for the timing, hold on. I'll be telling you. Now see, here I have recorded different components of CA and different components of capital account. I do not have so much time to discuss each component separately. So first you listen to me. Don't look at the PPT. Don't look at the slide. Listen to me carefully. Suppose that there is a BOP surplus. It means that there is an excess supply of foreign currency. So what the central bank will do? Central bank will buy foreign currency. If the central bank purchases foreign currency, then the stock of foreign exchange reserves of the central bank goes up. So if you have a BOP surplus, meaning that there is an excess supply of foreign currency, the central bank will make a purchase of foreign asset or foreign currency for that matter, and that leads to accumulation of stock of foreign exchange reserves of the central bank. Take for example the case of balance of payment deficit. If you have a balance of payment deficit, then what happens is this: there is an excess demand for foreign currency. If the excess demand has to be satisfied, what the central bank will do? The central bank will sell foreign asset. A central bank has a stock of foreign asset. The central bank will sell foreign asset. That means the stock of foreign exchange reserves of the central bank falls. So basically what you are getting is this: a BOP surplus means accumulation of foreign exchange. Deficit means decumulation of foreign exchange, of course, assuming that exchange rate is fixed. And central banks, this is intervention of the central bank, in the foreign exchange market. That means central bank can purchase foreign asset, can sell foreign asset, which has implication for the stock of foreign exchange reserves. So this is the, this is the intervention of the central bank. Now, central bank's intervention in foreign exchange market is called accommodating transactions. Central bank's intervention in the foreign exchange market is called accommodating transactions. Now, Devanjan, next slide. Let me see the next slide. No, not required. Then again, the next slide. Not required. Next slide. Yeah. Now, this is a point actually. Actually, this is called the adding up constraint. Now, if you add up all the three sub-accounts together, that means the current account, capital account, and official reserve transaction or official settlement account, if you add up all items together, we get 0. Now, the point is actually balance of payment situation is determined by current account and capital account. If there is a surplus, then there is an increase in stock of foreign exchange reserves. And if there is a deficit, then there is a fall in stock of foreign exchange reserves. Now, a typical Calcutta University question is, balance of payment always balances. Question number 1. And 2, balance of payment balances at equilibrium. Statement 2. Statement 1, balance of payment always balances. Statement 2, balance of payment balances only at equilibrium. Then the question comes, how can you reconcile between the two statements? Now, if you go by the accounting identity, that means if you take into account the current account, capital account, and the official reserve transaction or official settlement account all together, then you have a balance of payment accounting relation. So that is the balance of payment balances. But that is an accounting identity. But when we consider equilibrium, we only take into account the current account and capital account, as I mentioned earlier, and then you consider whether the economy experiences any kind of balance of payment surplus or deficit. So this can be rewritten as, now this is, I have not included in the slide, because if everything is included in the slide, in the PPT, then it reduces my opportunity to elaborate on or to speak on certain things. Actually, I am not a very slide savvy or PPT savvy person. I like to elaborate on basic things are written on the PPT, but that's it. Now, this can be represented as, now please note it down, this equal to 0, CA plus K plus what equal to 0. This can be rewritten as current account surplus. I'm going very slow. Current account surplus, within, then open a bracket, within bracket write deficit, within bracket write deficit, current account surplus, within bracket write deficit, plus net capital inflow, plus net capital inflow, after inflow again open a bracket and write outflow, equal to change in foreign exchange reserves, equal to change in foreign exchange reserves. I repeat myself again. Current account surplus or deficit plus net capital inflow or outflow equal to change in foreign exchange reserves. Take a simple numerical example. Suppose current account deficit is $10 and suppose net capital inflow is $15. Current account deficit is $10 and net capital inflow is $15. So what is the balance of payment situation? So current account deficit is $10. So write it as minus 10. Net capital inflow is $15, IT test plus 15. So you have a net balance of payment surplus of $5. So then under fixed exchange rate, what it will lead to? It will lead to increase in stock of foreign exchange reserves exactly by $5. In fact, if you look at the, I mean, not in the last 3 years, but before that, if you look at the India's balance of payment record, and this balance of payment statistics is given by RBI. If you look at the statistics and read a bit of economic survey, then what the picture you will be getting is that we have been running persistent current account deficit. But somehow, this current account deficit has been managed by quite a substantial amount of net capital inflow, not necessarily in the form of FDI, but primarily in the form of FPI, that means foreign portfolio investment. But what happened in the last 2-3 years is that Indian economy has been running current account surplus. But why so? Why the Indian economy suddenly started experiencing current account surplus? Will be coming to it, because for that we require some simple models. So this part is over. Now what I'll be doing next, the next discussion that follows from this discussion is model-centric discussion. That means we'll be having some simple models, that is included in the syllabus, to explain the determination of output, etc., trade balance, etc., in an open economy. Now here, let me tell you, before I go to the next slide or whatever the next, whenever the next model. Now see, the entire syllabus is based on the Keynesian approach to balance of payment. The entire syllabus, the Calcutta University syllabus. In fact, not only Calcutta University, it is the syllabus of the St. Xavier's College as well, by and large, based on the Keynesian approach. Now, if you ask me, sir, is it good exercise to know only the Keynesian approach and not the alternative approaches? Now, my position is this. As a student, one has to be familiar with different alternative approaches. Let me talk about myself. I am a diehard, not diehard, I am a Keynesian. Not very rabidly Keynesian, but yes, I am a Keynesian of sort. But the point is this, as a teacher, I do believe that the student should be made familiar with different alternative approaches to balance of payment. But again, the syllabus doesn't permit us to discuss all these alternative approaches. And that is a restriction imposed on a teacher by the syllabus itself. But again, we have to follow the UGC template. Anyway, now the next slide. This is done. Achha. Now see, Debanjan, next slide, next slide, Debanjan. Next slide again. This is I have explained. Yeah, this is very, very important. No, sorry. Earlier one. Yeah, this is very, very important. Why this is very, very important? Achha, Nilandu, please tell students not to put questions on the chat box now. I will be taking questions later. Let the students not put questions on the chat box now.
Okay.
We have a lot of time, so we can discuss the issues later on. So now this is very important because you see the balance of payment situation has a profound bearing on the macroeconomic system as a whole, and in particular on the financial system. But to understand this particular financial system, we have to essentially consider the balance sheet of the central bank. I'll be explaining because that will be a very critical component of the Mundell framing model Anyway, so the balance sheet of central bank, commercial bank, and the money multiplier, the students are already been taught. I mean, it is for Calcutta University, it is in syllabus, it is in semester 3. I guess for St. Xavier's College, it is in either semester 2 or 3. Jadavpur, semester 2, Presidency, semester 2. So this much I know. Bidhannagar Government College, that means in university, State University, Barashat, there the money supply is included in semester 2. So the students should have familiarity with the asset liability accounting of both central bank, commercial bank, and determination of money supply through the money multiplier approach. So very quickly, the assets of the central bank include gold, government bonds, domestic credit, etc. It is there. Important thing is the foreign exchange reserve. So that is the asset component of the central bank. And the liability component is, as I mentioned, currency, reserves, etc. Now, the sum of all assets gives the supply of high-powered money, and the sum of all liabilities gives the demand for high-powered money. And the demand for high-powered money equals supply of high-powered money. As you know, from any balance sheet, what we'll be getting is that the value of assets must equal the value of liability. So next slide. Next slide. Now see, as I mentioned earlier, balance of payment is what? Ultimately change in reserves of the central bank. Now, if you look at the balance sheet, Devanjan, just go back to the earlier slide, the students can understand better. You see, if there is a BOP surplus, the stock of foreign exchange reserves increases. Right, the stock of foreign exchange reserves increases, and you'll be immediately understanding if the stock of foreign exchange reserves increases, then money supply increases. Exactly opposite will happen if there is a BOP deficit. But why so? Next slide. Then next slide. Now see, BOP is change in reserves. No. Earlier. Yeah, hold on to it. Now BOP is change in reserves of central bank, which is, I have written delta H. Delta H is nothing but change in high-powered money. And what is delta M? Change in money supply. Small m into delta H. Now what is small m? Small m is nothing but money multiplier. Now this is what should be taught. The students should know from their semester 2 or semester 3 money supply chapter. So delta M equal to small m delta H. Now this is true under fixed exchange rate. The working of flexible exchange rate is completely different. And again, this fixed exchange rate and this transition from fixed to flexible exchange rate has a history of its own. Actually, after 1973, most of the advanced countries, the so-called developed capitalistic countries, gradually shifted towards the flexible exchange rate. And the developing countries have adopted flexible exchange rate in their post-reform period. For example, in India, the flexible exchange rate came after economic reforms. But so flexible exchange rate does what? Actually, flexible exchange rate always guarantees balance of payment equilibrium. Always, if there is a balance of payment surplus, then exchange rate adjusts to eliminate the surplus. If there is a balance of payment deficit, again the exchange rate adjusts to eliminate the balance of payment deficit. Now next slide. Now this I am not dwell on. Actually, this is nothing but the demand for foreign exchange and supply of foreign exchange. Let me tell you, this exchange rate that I am determining in this diagram through simple demand and supply curve is known as the spot rate. Spot rate means is a current exchange rate. Suppose you go to a market. Suppose you need dollar. So you ask, what is the exchange rate? Suppose the exchange rate, suppose the exchange rate is 50 rupee. That means $1 equal to 50 rupee. And you need $2. So you will be giving 100 rupee, you will be getting $2. So that is a spot rate. As opposed to spot rate, there is something called forward rate. Forward rate means, suppose I do not need dollar today. I need dollar, suppose after 1 month. But I negotiate with the currency trader regarding the exchange rate after 1 month. So that is called the forward rate. And there is a relation between the spot rate and the forward rate. In fact, I do not have time today to discuss these things in all details. The student should know the difference between the spot rate and forward rate, number one. The student should know the difference between uncovered interest rate parity and covered interest rate parity. And at the same time, students should know the purchasing power parity, both absolute and relative purchasing power parity. The time doesn't permit me to elaborate on all these things in all great details, but these are certain things that the student should know. Anyway, then the next slide. Next slide. This is I have already discussed. Next slide. Next slide, yes. Next slide, yeah. Now, open economy simple Keynesian model. Now, what is an open economy simple Keynesian model? Now, see, think of a closed economy. It will be easier for you to understand. Think of SKM in a closed economy. Now, SKM has been taught everywhere in semester 2. I guess, yeah, in semester 2. You know what is SKM, simple Keynesian model. I'm not again making the assumptions of SKM, but in an open economy, I am making an assumption. The assumption for this particular model is that, apart from the closed economy assumptions, is that the price, domestic price, price of foreign good in foreign currency, and exchange rate all are fixed. Price of domestic good, price of foreign currency in foreign good, as well as the nominal exchange rate, all are fixed. And since they are fixed, I set all of them equal to 1. Now, in a closed economy, what did you get? S plus T minus G equal to I. But in an open economy, what you will be getting? Plus X minus M. Yes. One more thing. Actually, there are two things. One is that I completely ignore capital account transactions. That means I assume that there is no capital flow. Number one. Number two, I completely leave out the monetary factors. As you know, as you move from SKM to ISLM, you incorporate monetary factors. So I ignored the monetary factors altogether. Notation or symbols used are standard, so I am not repeating that. Now, for different ways you can understand it. I mean, actually, this S plus T minus G equal to I plus X minus M, this can be alternatively written as the very standard way, Y equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So these are the things known to you. Now, S plus T minus G. S is private saving. T minus G is the public saving or government saving. So S plus T minus G is the national saving. Now, if I take I to the left hand, then NS minus I equal to X minus M. In a closed economy, NS minus I equal to 0. So NS equal to I. But in an open economy, NS minus I equal to X minus M. Next. Now see, since I assume that exchange rate is fixed, there is no guarantee that balance of payment will be at equilibrium. Now please do note, since I ignore capital account transactions altogether, balance of payment is same as balance of trade. So balance of payment, so-called balance of payment equilibrium, in absence of capital account transaction, is nothing but balanced trade. That means X minus M equal to 0. there is no guarantee that your initial economy will be at Y star. Look at the Y star. NS minus I is positively sloped with a negative intercept. And that is easy to understand. You know the saving curve. Saving curve is positively sloped with a negative intercept. And NS minus, and then you have a component I with a minus sign. So NS minus I has a negative intercept. But NS minus I rises as Y rises. Why? Because if Y rises, saving rises. If saving rises, then NS rises. Then NS minus I rises. X minus M is the trade balance. Now X minus M is downward sloping. Now why downward sloping? Very simple thing. If Y rises, then M rises, import rises. Here I assume, one more assumption that will be coming later. The very important assumption I am making here is this, that the imported commodity is a consumption good, not capital good or intermediate input. Not capital good and intermediate input. I am assuming that this is purely a consumption good. So we have this diagram is drawn on assumption that initially trade is balanced. That means NS minus I intersecting X minus M at a point on the horizontal axis. Now Y star is equilibrium output, initial equilibrium output. Look at Y star carefully. At Y star, that means the equilibrium point E star, NS minus I equal to X minus M equal to 0. That means trade is balanced. No guarantee that trade will be balanced. This is just for sake of simplicity. For sake of simplicity, because I'll be performing certain exercises, it will be easier to begin with balanced trade. Next slide. Now see, multiplier in an open economy. When I am writing multiplier in an open economy, just look at, I'll be definitely explaining it, but look at, say it is an investment multiplier. Y equal to C, Y minus T plus I plus G plus X minus MY. So I differentiate I with respect to, the equation with respect to I. So finally what I am getting is 1 minus C prime plus M prime, or 1 upon S prime plus M prime. Now this is a very simple algebra, simple calculus, so I am not interested in that. But you see the difference. In a closed economy, you have 1 upon 1 minus C prime as your multiplier. But in an open economy, you have 1 minus C prime plus M prime. In other words, in a closed economy, you have a multiplier 1 upon S prime. But in a closed economy, but in an open economy plus M prime. So that means the value of multiplier is less in an open economy. Next slide. Next slide. Now, actually, so this is a difference. So I have written the difference. At the economic close, the equilibrium. Next slide. So this is all right. Next. Now, what is the effect on trade balance? The effect of trade balance again is easy to understand. The effect on trade balance is that, forget the mathematics. B equal to X minus M function of Y. Now, if I rises, Y rises, import rises, export is autonomous. So if import rises, then X minus M falls. That means trade balance deteriorates. Next. Now see, this is a diagram. Actually, you see any standard textbook, on anything. Microeconomics, macroeconomics, international trade, development economics. See, this is, I do not know why. The economists always love to draw diagram. Probably diagram can explain things better. Probably. I'm not very sure. Now suppose I rises. If I rises, then what happens? NS minus I rises means NS minus I falls. So NS minus I line shifts downward. no change in X minus M. I begin with Y naught. That means initially trade is balanced. In an open economy, the equilibrium is E1, corresponding to the output level Y1. Also note, E1 is below the horizontal axis. Since it is below the horizontal axis, that means X minus M is negative. X minus M negative means what? At Y naught, X minus M is 0. Now, after the rise in I, you have X minus M negative, that is worsening of trade deficit. Sorry, worsening of trade balance. In other words, you start with balanced trade and you end up with trade deficit. So this is definitely a deterioration of balance of trade, which is same as balance of payment. So your output increases, but your trade balance goes into deficit. What would happen if the economy is a closed economy? If the economy is a closed economy, X minus M is 0. So basically it is a horizontal axis. So if the economy is closed, Ns minus I equal to 0. Because Ns equal to I. So in a closed economy, output would be at Y dash. So you understand from the diagram that the output increases more in a closed economy compared to an open economy. But what is the basic logic, underlying logic of it? Underlying logic of it is very simple. In a closed economy, if you know the multiplier mechanism, in a closed economy, when I rises, Y rises, an increase in Y leads to increase in consumption. So you have a multiplier mechanism. But in an open economy, you have increase in consumption, fair enough, but you have increase in import also. And import is a leakage. Leakage means what? Leakage means, if you recall again, semester 2 macroeconomics, circular flow of income. So leakage from circular flow of income, it goes out of the circular flow of income. So that means import has a dampening effect on aggregate demand. So since in an open economy, rise in Y is accompanied by rise in consumption as well as rise in import, then you have a less increase in net aggregate demand compared to a closed economy. And as a result, the value of multiplier is less. So that is because of an additional leakage in the form of import. Next. Devanjan bhai, next. As an export multiplier, I am skipping up. Suppose export goes up, then what happens? So that any student, the students in general are very sharp, which we often do not understand, or often we tend to undermine, and that's a very bad practice of teachers. The students can understand the export multiplier. That means autonomous increase in export. So next slide. Next slide. So this is a diagrammatic representation. Next slide. Next slide. This is the same thing. Now the continuation of export multiplier. Working of the multiplier I have explained step by step, because I do believe that one should know how the multiplier works. I have my own reason to tell you why multiplier works. This working is very important. I'll be coming to, when the interactive session will start, I will be discussing next, because the next is important. Next. Ignore it for the time being. If time permits, I'll be coming to it. Ignore it again. Yeah, this one. No, earlier one. Now this one. Now, actually, this particular question is prompted by an ISI question in 2013, if my memory doesn't betray me much. Let me tell you the ISI question straight away. Then I'll be coming to it. The question was this: what will be the value of investment multiplier if the entire investment is purchase of imported capital good? That was the question. Now, let me tell you one thing. Now, this is actually based on that, probably we can come to some specific dimensions of Indian economic issues. Now, see, that if you look at a developing country, then a developing country after liberalization does import consumption goods. No doubt about it. Because in a liberalized trade regime, import of capital goods and import of oil. I am considering oil importing countries. And oil, as you know, is an intermediate input. In my earlier slide, I considered the intermediate input, and in this slide, I am considering the import of capital goods. I want to discuss the import of capital goods because the question, as in the introduction, Tilakda mentioned it, that often the teaching learning process would be so oriented that the students get some kind of exposure to problem solving, particularly the good textbook problems as well as the ISI DSE problems. And I have a feeling, let me tell you very honestly, 2010 onwards, if you take the simple data on student success rate in such competitive exams, I take 4 institutions together, ISI, both Calcutta and Delhi School of Economics, JNU, and IGIDR. If you look at the success rate from 2010 onwards for the West Bengal as a whole, I am not specific about any particular college. I am not specific, let me put it more bluntly. I'm not specific about any particular so-called elite institution because I do not believe in elitism. Now, if you look at the success rate, it is absolutely dismal. Now, during this COVID time, I have an opportunity to interact some of the Delhi students, and both semester 3 and semester 5, and some of the teachers of Mirinda and Mirinda in particular, to some extent, St. Stephen's. What I have figured out from my interaction with them is that whenever they are actually studying the microeconomics, macro, statistics, math, etc., simultaneously they are solving the problems of ISI and DSE. They do not wait till semester 4. They do it simultaneously, and naturally they are very well prepared. So that is one of the reasons probably the success rate of West Bengal has been so dismal. Maybe that might be one explanation. There might be other complex explanations which I do not want to discuss on a public platform. Now, consider import of capital goods. Suppose we denote proportion of an investment expenditure on imported capital goods. Now, this V, I have not written it because I know that I will be explaining it. This V is actually a fraction. It lies between 0 and 1. Extreme case, V0, and one extreme case, other extreme case, V1. Achha. V0 means what? No import of capital good. V equal to 1 means entire investment is on imported capital good. And V lying between 0 and 1 means, I am just giving an example. Suppose your aggregate investment expenditure is 100 units, out of which 60 units is spent on purchase of domestic capital good and 40 is spent on the imported capital good. So you understand what is the value of V. That 40% of imported capital good, that is your V. So suppose that, so the two extreme values is V equal to 0, no import of capital good, is an Atmanirbhar Bharat. The concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat is recently mooted, though long back during the second 5-year plan. Jawaharlal Nehru also talked about the self-reliant economy or Atmanirbhar Bharat. That means V equal to 0. And if the Bharat is not Atmanirbhar, that means not self-reliant, then V equal to 1. The ISI question is V equal to 1. The entire investment is, expenditure is on imported capital good. Now see what is the investment multiplier. So I have written the equation C plus I plus G plus X minus N. But M is replaced by VI. So what I am getting, C plus C function of Y minus T, all right, disposable plus 1 minus VI plus G plus X. DI is 1 divided by 1 minus C prime, which is basically a multiplier in a closed economy. Or if V lies between 0 and 1, which is a realistic case, then you understand value of the investment multiplier is somewhat dampened. But what is the logic behind it? See, if just don't restrict yourself to equations. That's not a very good good